induction program from 4 p.m. We are in Ujjain, so Bhopal Learning Center is conducting an induction program for the joinees of courses from 4 p.m. ma'am, 4 to 5 p.m.
So Panigrahi sir, shall I have to wind up by 4?
Namaskar, madam.
Namaskar, sir. No, there is a participant who they have some induction program from 4 onwards, so maybe they want to leave the room. And I don't know after that how many participants I will be left
Which
with.
industrial meeting? Even the industrial meeting is, I don't think that is so necessary for you. Continue for your class. Okay. Because induction already we have done. So if you want to continue the class, you should join the class. Because induction, nothing they are going to tell you. Because induction already done. We have done the induction. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Only induction they will tell you when the examination form will fill up, then nothing else. As assignment you have to submit. Assignment you have to submit before October 31st, and examination form fill you have to do before October 15th, and you have to appear examination in the December. So this much only they will. This is the important things for you. Nothing else in induction. So you can continue your class. Fine.
Or maybe you can go for some time, and if you find it interesting, you can. Choice is yours.
Okay, ma'am, we will just confirm about the examination dates in December, tentative
Okay,
examination
okay,
date.
no
See,
problem.
exam date for the December examination, you have to fill up your form on and before October 15th, and you have to submit your assignment on and before October 31st. These two is relevant for you. Already you have done the induction, you have missed the induction. Okay. Already Bhubaneswar is done the induction for you, all of you. But there is no importance in induction meeting. So kindly continue with your class because this is very relevant for you. Right?
Okay, sir, we'll continue.
Continue, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Today we will take up the third block, that is on tribal identity and other issues associated with identity. So, before starting with it, you know, I I have already told you that in the last two blocks we are discussing about the crisis that the tribes face in modern times. When we talk about the neoliberal times, the contemporary times, and the crisis that we are talking about right now, it is something different from the so-called classical anthropologists like Ratcliffe Brown or Malinowski had studied. It is completely a different setup because they are no more in a closed society where hardly any societal or external force is affecting. It was affecting them then, but now things are completely different. So basically, there are certain forces of modernity, and when we talk about the modern society is marked with few indicators. When you say that, okay, you are modern or not, how do I gauge that? Because today I believe I am modern. My grandfather, when he was of my age, he used to be claiming that he was modern. Tomorrow my grandchild would claim that he or she is modern. So what is it about this idea of modernity that we keep talking about? So modernity is built up with certain values, certain traits that we must understand. It could be freedom, equality. It could be your idea of democracy, your idea of secularism. So, if you remember last class, I told you that modern societies in Europe emerged with three revolutions. The French Revolution. The French Revolution gave you political modernity. Enlightenment. Enlightenment gave you social modernity, and Industrial Revolution gave you economic modernity. So with political modernity, you started having your ideals of democracy, liberalism, equality, freedom, fraternity, those ideas that French Revolution gave us. And we believe that that has opened up the realm for political modernity to us. When you talk about economic modernity, we believe, the way you got integrated into the entire world system. Capitalism could be exploitative, but at the same time, capitalism could be liberating because it gave you the ability to grow on your own merit. So you have different dichotomous positions when you talk about capitalism. And then social modernity. Social modernity is something where we have to talk about the basic values of freedom, the basic values of you will say that doing away with superstitions. The when you make a transition from the medieval times to the modern times, we tend to talk about certain values where we start believing in rationality, using your own reason, not being motivated by tradition or any kind of custom, but being reasonable enough to do something on your own. So basically that has these are the foundational values of modern society. And when we say talk about the modern society, we cannot think about modern society if we don't talk about the very principle of equality, because the very basis of modern society is equality. I don't claim that equality as a principle did not exist prior to modernity, but it became a way of life. When we talk about these modern societies, this emergence of these modern societies, it was more or less triggered by some kind of scientific inventions and discoveries. For example, in biology, you discovered that all human anatomy is same. Even if the person is a negroid, the person is a white or a black or a brown person, it doesn't matter, the anatomy remains same. The number of blood groups, they remain, the category of 4 or 5 blood groups that you have, it is universal. You will find it in all kinds of human being. So science gave you that very idea that equality is something that is a principle we need to adhere to. And since your physical and biological sciences, they claim these principle of equality, we have to treat each one of us, irrespective of their caste, their religion, their language, their ethnicity, as equal. So that was the first principle that the modern societies gave us. And another thing that characterizes the modern society, especially the modern nation state, is the idea of diversity. There lies a problem. When I say that you are equal, to be equal, you have to be similar. You would be similar in every way. So when you are similar, it is easier for me to distribute something among yourself in the classroom. But when things are so very dissimilar, I do not know how to handle dissimilarity. For a very long period of time, Western political thought used to think that equality can only be bestowed if there is similarity. That was a precondition to equality. But as I told you, the modern society was all about diversity, because modern society, your doors have been opened up. You have the process of colonialism, you have people from different ethnicity coming to your place, you are migrating somewhere, you are going out, people are coming in. So there you find the kind of people you have never come across or encountered, people who are strange, whose practices are so very different. Now, how do I talk about equality in these terms? So in a very simple practical definition is that equality means that everybody is treated in the same way, similarly. While diversity means that there are considerable definite social and cultural differences among the population, often treating different types of individuals and community equally. When can I treat them? Only when I'm sure that, just a minute, only when I'm sure that they're similar. It is easier for me to handle it. But when you say that, okay, take for example the idea of gender, we talk about gender inequality because men and women, they are so very different in their you can say roles, in their approaches, the expectation that the society has from them, they're so very different and diverse. So when I talk about equality in those terms, it is very difficult. So the basic issue was that we were talking about a, uh, modern existence, and we were again talking about equality. So as I told you earlier, the revolutions in France, England, United States, be it the French Revolution, the American War of Independence, they, you know, made certain what do you say, expressions that severed you from the traditional social order. So as I told you earlier, French Revolution attacked the very idea of privileges being given to the aristocracy and the clergy. It meant, it was, the basis was equality again. But if you look into the details of the French Revolution, at the end of the day, it did not apply those principles equality everywhere. For example, women, for example, slaves, it was the idea of right to vote was not given to them after the revolution became successful. Similarly, when you talk about the American Civil War, it was also a struggle for equality. And you know we could see that there were so many genocides taking place. Talk about the Jews, talk about the Armenians in the Ottoman Empire. They were, ethnic groups who were claiming for equal status, and that kind of bias, it was difficult to, it was difficult for the ruling party to overcome that. So basically, we are dealing with the concept of equality, and the basic problem is giving equality to people who are in dissimilar positions, dissimilar locations. How do I treat them equally? So you know as I told you earlier, uh, people, I would say that you might have seen this very picture of equity, where different people of different heights, they have been given the same stool, and with, if they use the same stool to stand and look out of the window, that creates, again, that retains the same differences or the same unequal positions that they had earlier. But if I would be giving them stools according to their height, suppose somebody is 6 foot, that person doesn't need a stool. Somebody is 4 foot high, I would give a longer stool to the person who is 4 feet high than the person who is 5 foot. Maybe I will be giving a very short stool to that person. So in that context, you can tell me that I was not dealing with them in terms of equality. Yes, maybe. But when we talk about equality in this sense, we are talking about equality in a very formalistic realm. The kind of equality that the modern society talks about is an equality that is need based, because the person was tall enough, he never needed a stool, perhaps he needs something else, so let me look into that thing instead of giving him a stool which will, you know bring him out of the frame, perhaps if he gets that much taller. So we call it substantive equality. So you have important thinkers who have talked about broadly this idea of equality, and they believe that no special privileges for any individual, equal opportunity for all, and so that that person can use his skill, his talent to get whatever he desires, he or she desires from life, equal access to social benefits, absence of any kind of economic and social exploitation. So, according to this definition, the principle of equality should not only be legalistic, because legally you are saying that because your constitution has given you the legal status of being equal, but what I would say that your access to certain benefits, do you have those, are those access equal enough? So equality has certain characteristics. Fundamental equality of persons, when you are talking about equality, those persons should be in a position of being equal. Equality of opportunity, equality of conditions, where there is an attempt to make the conditions of life equal, equality of outcome or results. So, when we are talking about these principles of equality, we have to talk about different dimensions of equality: political equality, economic equality, legal equality, social equality. So, you know, we have to say that whether a wide range of equality exists in a particular society. Take for example the American society. We would say that we still witness social inequality in terms of income groups. Say the Afro Americans, they earn much lesser than the whites. Or in a similar situation, if you look at the French society, you will see that France is the epitome of equality, liberty and fraternity. That was the place where democracy was given birth. But still you will find that the blacks, the Muslim migrants, they are in a very regressive state, and look at their lifestyle, their income level, it is much lesser than their whiter counterparts. So I do not, neither the state means to, I don't mean to say that the state has uh, caused certain kind of discrimination to its citizens, but it is important to understand that where did one start off. As I told you, that a person who is tall enough, we don't have to give them a stool to stand up and see the things outside the window. But somebody who is too very short, that person needs a stool. So we have to talk about equality in terms of needs. And if do not, we believe that okay, similar things, by equality we mean similar things should be given to you, but that can only be possible when people are similar. Had your entire class been of one height, then maybe similar stools of similar heights could be given to each and every one of you. That would have made sense. But now that your heights are so very different, you come from different backgrounds, one single approach of dealing with everyone and each one of you is not going to help. So as I told you, why is it that the blacks in America, or the Muslim migrants in France, they are in a position where they earn very less than their white counterparts? The reason is, historically they have been in a disadvantageous position, and that justifies your concept like reservation. So in order to deal with this concept, we have to take up another issue, that is difference. uh, Difference as a category, it started coming to us only in a modern society, because remember I told you again and again, and if you have read, yesterday we were talking about totemism and Durkheim's work. Durkheim said that in these pre-modern societies, people were a kind of, they have a kind of a mechanical solidarity which is based on similarity. people in those societies, they are similar in every way. They think similarly, they do the same kind of things, so it is marked by similarity. But in a modern society, as I told you, your doors are open, you have people coming from different places, you have migrants, you have immigrants, you encounter each other who have different cultural barriers. So there lies a problem of difference, and the criteria of difference could be anything. It could be income, it could be race, it could be language, it could be your sexual orientation, it could be your color, it could be your gender, it could be anything. And it's a human tendency, let me tell you, that we tend to hierarchize everything. You know, it is very easy to hierarchize things like, as I told you yesterday, that how much grades you have secured in your exam. Let's have a hierarchy. We will have the top marks on the first rungs of the ladder, and eventually we will go down the ladder. Similarly, I would say that let's hierarchize your income categories or the age group of persons. But when we are dealing with criteria like language, for example, I would say that okay, people who speak Hindi uh, can be a better group than people who speak Bengali. So does that make sense? I mean, when we hierarchize a particular language, on what basis we would be saying that this particular language is better than another language? You know, the north south language war has always been there, Hindi versus Tamil. Or for example, I would try to create a hierarchy of languages that is spoken in India. Can we do that? What do you say? Is it possible to do that? Well, we shouldn't be doing that, but we still do that, isn't it? Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Yeah. So when I say that we tend to hierarchize, there is actually no measurement of doing that. How do I evaluate that a particular language is better than another? I really do not have a particular yardstick for that. But I still do that. The reason being that it is a human tendency, because maybe perhaps I speak Hindi, so I believe that okay, perhaps I am a better speaker, or maybe Hindi speakers are more learned than some other language speakers. So basically, when it comes to things like language, things like race or gender, that lies as vertical categories, we tend to hierarchize them. So, and the same thing holds true for color. You know, for a very long period of time, the entire American Civil War was based on this idea of color. So it you know, only after the 60s we came up with the slogan that black is beautiful, because we believe that the definition of being beautiful is white. So when you say that black is beautiful, it took us ages to realize that. But has there been any, you know, criteria of determining that white as a color is better? Have we read it somewhere? Or is there any scientific reason behind that? No. So in similar way, we have hierarchized gender, we have hierarchized ethnicity, we have hierarchized every possible thing that we come across, which shouldn't actually be hierarchized. So, if you remember, I was telling you that I was giving you the example that in some of the countries, you have a section of population, like I told you, in the American society there are communities like the Afro Americans who earn much lesser than the white. What could be the reason? Is it that they have low IQ level? Does it give me enough scope to measure their IQs and then come to the conclusion that okay, blacks have less IQ than whites and that makes black the color inferior? I do not do that also. The reason is that the kind of skills that is needed to go through this evaluation system is something that a particular section is more acquainted with. For example, I would say that there are certain skills that we need to pass an exam, and there are certain communities, certain sections who are well equipped to do so. If you remember in yesterday's class, I was referring to this thinker called Bordu. Bordu has talked about you know different capitals. Capitals means the punji that you have. Normally by capital we believe wealth and the assets that I have. But Burdu says that there are four different types of capital: economic capital, social capital, cultural capital, and your symbolic capital. It is very important for us to know here that what is social capital. Social capital is the kind of connection that you have. you know you have a classmate 10 years down the line who used to study in your school, and today that person is an IS officer or a big officer in the police force. So maybe you need some help, you can just give him a call and say that you are so and that person would be happy to help you. So the background that you come from, you are able to build some kind of social capital. Cultural capital is the skill that you have. The skill could be anything. And in a typical Indian scenario where we come from these Hindi medium or these vernacular medium schools, English becomes a very tough thing. And people who, I mean, students who are from English medium schools, they have certain kind of, they come from certain kind of privileged backgrounds. So it's kind of a circular thing. You have economic capital, आपके पास पैसा है, you can go and you can send your school children to good schools, English medium schools, where they can pick up good the your idea of good language. Again, I told you, we cannot hierarchize that English as a language is better than Hindi, no, but still we do that because we believe it is a language of opportunity. You pick up cultural skill. Then since you have cultural skill, you have gone to a big school where people from influential families, their kids are studying there. The moment they pass out, you will find them in good positions. At some point you will develop social capital. So by poverty we mean we do not have economic capital, you do not have social capital, and you do not have cultural capital. What's my point? So what I'm trying to say here, that these people that we are talking about, when we say that they are in an unequal position, they are different not because they are low in IQs, or not because God has made them lazy, or God has made them build them with low levels of IQ. No, that is not the thing. The thing is that they don't have access to these capitals that you have been having for a generation. you know I am the first generation from my family who was exposed to education, while you are the fourth generation. So definitely you will be having better cultural and social capital than I am having, isn't it? So you perhaps, when I was talking about those tools, you might not need a stool, but I would need one. So that justifies why we have to talk about differential treatment when we are talking about, when we are addressing equality, because we do not stand on the same footing. So to this, Dipankar Gupta says that differences in language, religion, race, or sex are differences that in themselves exist, but they do not contain the property of inequality. It is we as human beings that we hierarchize things and we put them in situations of inequality. And they were supposed to retain those horizontal status, but we keep them in a vertical way. So this is where prejudice takes over. So people think that okay, men are superior to women, certain linguistic groups are more civilized than this. हम बोलते हैं ना कि ये भाषा ज्यादा अच्छा है because it is more civilized, or this kind of religion, it has bigotry than that kind of religion. We have a more developed kind of a culture. So the list continues कि अच्छा, men are physically stronger or women. We keep giving justification on the basis of nature. But what I am trying to say that nature doesn't have that property of inequality. It is as human beings. Why we feel that men are superior to women because they are physically strong? Because we in our society, we have not allowed women to train their bodies in that way. We want women to present themselves in a particular way for which physical strength is not needed. While if you are a man, if you are a boy growing up to become a man, it is a definitely a very tough job, because you will have all kinds of peer pressure of masculinity. If you will be close to your mother, or you will be playing with your sister or friends who are girls in the school, people will tease you that you are being girlish or you are being sissy. So these are pressures of masculinity. So you have to be a man. So in that way, you have oriented your body, you have oriented your mind. So similarly, women have oriented themselves in different ways. So talking about these racial differences, you will see that such kind of ideas do exist. The Europeans colonized the people, and they when because they were the Europeans, the white people were the one. At one point of time, it was the Europeans who conquered more than 90% of the globe. So it was Europe ruling the entire world. And if you look at the monographs written by them on, say, some native tribes, it is written from their point of view. And they have all kinds of biases. And that's the, kind of a stereotype that we have created. That is again a difference that we have hierarchized. That white is better because some kind of superiority has been maintained by that kind of a justification. Now, coming to the Indian scenario, I told you that, you know, uh, India had an experience with colonialism, and it's we debated it yesterday that what colonialism has given to India, and at the same time, the tribal people of India. And I told you again and again that when we talk about the Indian context, colonialism brought a massive structural change which no other conqueror could do to India. Massive structural change in terms of the policies, in terms of your way of life, the way I used to live my life. And when I say that, okay, we talk about modern society, the idea of European modernity is completely different from Indian modernity. Because when you are talking about European modernity, we believe there were these three revolutions that brought modernity. So when in Europe you saw industrialization as a mark of a modern society, in India, how did we experience modernity? We experienced it through colonial intervention. It was colonially mediated. So we saw deindustrialization rather than industrialization. Why? Because that was again a structural change where these colonial rulers, they came and they said that you don't have access to the natural resources. It belongs to the state. It belongs to us. जंगल से आप लकड़ी नहीं ले सकते, आप ये नहीं कर सकते, आप suppose I would say that the price of cotton is high in the international market. They would say that you have to now grow cotton instead of rice. Even if you don't get food, it doesn't matter. What suits us, you have to do that. So that was a structural change that was brought by colonialism. So similarly, it affected the tribal life enormously when they said that you cannot enter the jungles. And these are the communities who have been surviving on jungle and the forest products all their lives. And it's like taking away not only their livelihood but their life out of them. So in a response, when India attained independence, it was well aware of these loopholes that took place during the colonial times, and that's the reason why the constitution guaranteed these sections with certain privileges, and again I would not call it privileges, because we have to think about the idea of equality in terms of diversity, in terms of difference. Because you see, when I believe that somebody is in a uh, somebody is in a, what do you say, in a position of being same, it is very easy to apply equality. But now, if you make a comparison between the tribes and the non tribes, as I told you, your heights are different, and I am trying to give you the same kind of stool. And here you have people who would be complaining कि उनको क्यों reservation दिया गया, why this was given to them, why do they have this article as a privilege. This is not a privilege. This is because they were in a position of downtrodenness, which was historically and systematically done over the years for generations together. तो एक पॉलिसी में कुछ नहीं हो जाएगा. We have to wait for generations to bring them to your level, because they neither have economic capital, nor social capital, nor cultural capital, nothing. So you have the provision of Article 14, 15, and 16. Then you have the granting aid, which is very specific to the tribes, that is Article 275. Protective articles like, the National Commission for Scheduled Tribes. You have, the Punch Seal, or the 5-point approach formulated by Varier Elwin and Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, who advocated minimal governance and autonomy. Leave them to their own way. They have the right to develop their own way. You don't have to go and tell them ki na na, this is good for you. You have to mainstream yourself, you have to educate yourself in the colleges and schools that people from non tribal categories go. No, they come from a different social system. So respect that system. You respect their privacy the way they do. They are not intervening in your life, so why do you need to do that? So that was the kind of response that the Indian society, the Indian state, they could give. But again, as I told you, that we have entered the modern times, and even if you want, the tribes could not be left isolated. And there will be contact between the tribes and non-tribes because of various reasons, because of migration, because of forced displacement. And even if you are not disturbing them, suppose there is some kind of ecological degradation in that place, they have to leave that place. So it is very difficult to maintain the kind of isolationism that Verrier had dreamt of. So your everyday experience would be different. And that is how we need to fortify the rights of the tribes in terms of certain government legislations which can ensure them equality and protection. So here you will see that tribal and non-tribal interactions, they take place both in rural and urban areas, because it's not just restricted to the urban areas. And again, there are so many things, so many diversity when we talk about tribes. For example, the northeastern tribes, we have so many popular stereotypes. We say that, okay, we give them names like Chinky, they are more closer to north, China than to India. We have this idea that tribal women are very strong, uh, they are physically strong and sturdy, so maybe they are best suited for domestic jobs and maids. They can really work hard as domestic helpers, or for all kinds of daily wage laborers. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that we have a particular perception on the tribes, and this perception is based on, say, the books we have read, or the kind of images you are exposed to in popular media. Just imagine the way, you know, the thing is that how many movies, mainstream movies we have seen where the tribes have been represented at all. And even if you find certain representation of tribes, it's in a very comic and funny way, in which they are portrayed as foolish people who can be fooled in any situation. So basically what I'm trying to say that there is a idea of why do you have such kind of a stereotype, because we have a different notion of the tribes, and since they come from a different social system, we are not in a situation to handle that difference. We have tend to hierarchize that difference. So that is the basic principle that lies behind the idea of tribal societies. There is another concept when we talk about, we refer to the tribes, that is the concept of ethnicity. Now, what does it mean by ethnic? Ethnic, actually, this term comes from the Greek word ethnos, meaning nation. So, it actually doesn't mean a political community, but it makes sense when we say that people who belong to an ethnic group, they come from a common descent or kinship category. So basically, if one is supposed to be belonging to one ethnicity, there is some similarity between themselves. So Weber, Max Weber defines ethnic groups as that entertains a subjective belief in their common descent because of the similarity in physical type, customs, the memories of colonization, migration. There is some similarity. And according to the main characteristics of ethnic group, it is based on real and assumed common descent. The descent that we refer to, it could be an assumed one, or it could be a real one, or the way you said, that okay, northeasterns are Chinese because we believe they belong to one ethnicity. So that's the thing, it could be assumed or it could be real. People's belief in the common descent makes it irrelevant whether it is real or false. Commonality of the ethnic people may be of one criteria. It could be physical appearance, your historical experience. Suppose I would say that okay, it was when China attacked Tibet, you have Tibetans migrating into India, and you have so many clusters at Dharmasala in Odisha also. You have so many clusters of Tibetans living in and around India because of migration. So, there is another concept that we often use along with ethnicity, and that is nationalism. What is nationalism? Nationalism is basically, the sentiment of belonging to one nation. It is an ideology based on the belief that people with common characteristics such as language, religion, ethnicity, they constitute a separate, distinctive political community. So the basis of nationalism in majority of these cases are ethnic similarity. Look at Europe. They are brought together either because of their religion or because of their language, the kind of language they speak. So they are claiming to be of belonging to different ethnicity. So in case of India, think about the languages we speak. There are, I think, more than 1200 languages, including the dialects. Or think about the religion, think about the cultural forms, think about the different ways we address culture. It is so very diverse. So, could we claim a nationalism based on ethnicity that majority of other countries have done? It is really very difficult on our part to do that, and that is the reason why in the Indian context we have not referred to nationalism in terms of ethnicity only. If you remember, you know the very relationship between nation and state, when you talk about nation and state, these are actually two different concepts. Nation is the sentiment of being one, that binds you together culturally. the way I said that some ethnic backing. It could be language, it could be religion, it could be anything, any cultural form that makes you a nation. The way you bond with each other, that makes you a nation. But when I say state, and remember, nation is also marked with a kind of a territory. When you say that India as a nation, we believe that it is the territoriality within the territories of India, that is from Kashmir to Kanyakumari or from east to west. We are a nation. So, personally, it's again a nation is called also an imagined community. Personally, I might not be knowing all Indians, but I believe there exists a kind of fraternity between us as Indians. So some Indian getting killed somewhere in another country, it really boils our blood that our how our brother has been violated in this way. Doesn't it happen to us, even though that person was never known to us personally? Because we have this strong sense of belonging to one nation. And state is when that entire territory comes under one political authority. We call it a state. So from there, when there is a congruence between the idea of nation and state, we call it a nation state. Means a territory having some commonality, the bond created because of that commonality, and having one political authority, that makes it a nation state. You know, during the time when Napoleon invaded almost the entire of Europe, parts of Africa, and parts of Asia. Could we ever say that, Europe, Africa, and Asia, it could become one nation state, even though it came under one kind of political authority? We couldn't claim the idea of a nation because nation is the sentiment. It is based on some kind of a cultural form. But the case, as I told you, the case of India, we like Europe is a very small place, and it is defined by its smallness. It has one religion, it has one language that binds them together. And as I told you, we have 1200 something languages, we have 600 some plus religions, we have so many sects, we have so many cults. It's so diverse. So the basis of our nationalism was the diversity of ethnicity, and that's the reason why we said unity in diversity, because the basis of nationalism here was not religion or language but diversity as such. So when we talk about the tribal population, in a plural country like India, where we respect diversity, the tribal population is also diverse in itself. It is not that we have one kind of a tribal group which is so very, you know, monolithic in its terms. No. And we have two different approaches for dealing with it. The isolationist approach that was given by Varier Elvin, where he says that, let them have their own culture, let them be the way they want to see themselves, the way they want to grow. Don't try to teach them what they should be doing, because they know their system is completely different. So their aspirations are different from yours. Your children would like to become IS officer. That's not what they aspire to be. They have a different set of aspirations. And there was this assimilationist school that was favored by Ghure and Thakur Baba, and they said that, these tribes, they need to be assimilated into the mainstream. If not, they will remain backward. So by mainstreaming them, we can take them forward. But the thing is that, again, when you say you are mainstreaming them, they come from a different system and a different setup altogether. And today, where you stand and a tribal boy or a girl has to compete with you, the person who never had the kind of examination system that you have been facing, the person who doesn't even speak your language, they have their own tribal language, they have their own tribal religion, and trying to understand your culture, your language, writing the exam again in another language, oof, it's a hell lot of affair. And That's the reason we believe that we are not being fair, even though we believe that so many privileges are being given to them. So there are actually different ways and approaches we have to deal with. Coming to the ethnic relations in India, when we talk about the tribal context, you will see that Milton Singer, he said that we need to understand ethnicity and its impact on society. And he says that there are four major types of multi-ethnic societies in the contemporary world. A society built out of formally equal ethnic groups, where you find that people they belong to the same ethnic group. Suppose I would say the you know the even if in a small country like Sri Lanka you have the Singhalis and the Tamilians going against each other as ethnic groups. So suppose there is one single ethnic group that can itself make a society. There are societies in which a major national cultural group and other ethnic communities, they are separated by highly permeable boundaries. One or more ethnic groups can be strongly oriented towards an outside society, then one or more ethnic groups disadvantaged within the larger society, as in case of us, where we have some more than uh, diverse tribal cultures, and they are so very diverse from each other, they are so very diverse from us, and yet they are in the same race as we want them to be in. And that is the reason we say that there are two broad possibilities how these two ethnic communities can live in proximity. One is assimilation, where a process of boundary reduction can occur when members of two groups they meet, they come in contact, and at the end of this entire process, if it is successful, you will see that there is no major social or cultural differences among the communities. Dissimulation, a process whereby intra-societal differences are maintained and created among the subcultural groups. So it is a continuous process. The reverse is also possible. At one point of time, you get assimilated, then you get dissimulated. So it is endless. The process can continue. Then how to look at the look into the case of ethnic conflicts between the tribal categories. So you have certain ethnic conflicts that you will see all over the world. you know there is this famous writer who wrote about I'm just missing out his name. The name of the book was uh, Class of Civilizations by Samuel Huntington. So basically, it is a rise. The present globalized age, see, it has seen the rise of these ethnic groups going against one another. At one point of time, we were, after the Enlightenment, when the modern times had come, we had started preaching the idea of equality among all races. And now we see there is this rise of these ethnic groups. There is this idea of ethnic communities going against one another, especially after the 9/11. We see it as a ethnic conflict. Now the present scenario, look at the kind of war crisis that has come up in Israel, or what you see in Syria, or what you see all over the globe. There is this conflict between these ethnic categories. So Horwich has given us 10 explanations which more or less covers all the theoretical perspectives in ethnic conflicts. Ethnicity is due to, firstly, it is due to prior affiliation, which is described as being part of a tradition and being indispensable for most of the communities. So, the self consciousness of belonging to this particular community, and at the same time, when you draw the boundary that, okay, I stand here and I do not make a part of the other community. So there is a traditional notion of who we are and who are the others. If we say that, okay, Hindus and Muslims are the two ethnic communities, then okay, where I stand and where the others stand. We normally have this sense of notion. So you might not show it, but deep within you might be having some idea of this ethnicity because of the kind of messages you have been pumped up. The way you grew up, the way you have been socialized, they all act on us. Then there are certain ancient hatreds that produce conflicts. The way we have portrayed Pakistan, the way we India would never show its loopholes to its own citizens, and Pakistan would never do that either. If I say that, okay, history being the same, geography being the same, how come the history that Pakistani students read is different from the history that we read? And nobody is telling a lie, we all are telling the truth. But when I say that, okay, read, just check the textbooks of Pakistan regarding the chapter on partition, how it has been represented, who has been made the hero, who has been made the villain, and you will find a different narrative in India. And no historian is lying, I tell you, both are telling the truth. But it takes what you suppress, what you sow, that there lies the problem. So the kind of an ancient hatred is filled in you right from the way you are growing up. The stories you have heard from your grandparents, the things that you have picked up from your school textbooks, they give you a different idea of ethnicity. Ethnic class is also a cultural class. Different communities have different values systems. So what is sacred for one could be profane for another. If one religion prescribes for something, another religion would be prescribing for something else, or would be saying, it would be in awe of the other thing. Ki, "Acha, how come chichi, how come you do this, how come you eat that kind of food?" So it's again a kind of a cultural class. Modernity brings about ethnic conflict because modern values of equality, liberty, fraternity are sometimes incompatible with your traditional values. And traditional values are not really well equipped in dealing with the changes that is brought by modern societies. So where you see open competition, where we see that, okay, some ethnic population which was not deserving of this position today, and because of the changes in government or the new policies, they have started taking advantage, and it will always give you the sense of losing the regime. Ki, now the regime has, once upon a time we used to be the king, they used to be the slave, now the ulta thing is happening. So the modernization process brings such situations where you have different ideas of merit coming up. Then ethnic conflict is caused due to economic competition between ethnically differentiated segments of the working class or ethnically differentiated traders and customers. So the kind of the movement that you have, the sons of the soil movement, when you say that, okay, there is this particular ethnic community, uh, tribal community, who want to drive away other persons, the non-tribals, from their place. And maybe it has taken in some states also, you have the kind of ethnicity. They believe that people from outsiders are coming in, they are taking the jobs, we are being underprivileged. That ethnic group could be in form of a language, it could be in the form of a tribal community. Then at the same time, you will find ethnic networks are used to exchange goods and services in particular societies. There is a reduction of transaction cost and makes it cheaper for people to interact with their own kinship people. You remember, I have told you again and again, if you look at the Marwari community, they have always been prosperous right from the beginning. I really don't have I have not experienced seeing any Marwari, any person from the Marwari community who is not rich or who is really poor. Because those traits of business, those traits lie within those community, that we have to respect. There has been many studies on this community. So it is that ethnic group, they will facilitate certain kind of exchange that facilitates the modern situation. Then at the same time, you will see the new entrepreneurs, mostly in India. If you look at the entrepreneurs, mostly the Tatas, JRD Tata just passed away last night. The Parsi community, it has immense contribution to entrepreneurship. The Marwari community, there are communities where we look up to the Tatas, Birlas, they all belong to this, Parsis background. So again, we somehow, have this idea of elite entrepreneurs coming from a particular ethnic group. So it has nothing to do with, their genes, but something about that community that they have been cultivating and they have been passing on as a process of socialization to the next generation. And then you have these ethnic conflicts that is based on the need for survival of groups. So solidarity of the groups, they develop, and they tend to help each other so that they can coexist in these modern times. Okay, any doubt till now, or anything you want to add, or any clarification? No? So maybe we can take a 5 minutes break till we meet. Welcome back, everyone. We will continue our discussion on ethnicity. Just give me a moment. Yeah, so what I was trying to say that we have discussed right now the different, explanations on the basis of which certain theoretical perspectives on ethnic conflict has been constructed. Just give me a moment. So you have, the scholar called Michelle Brown. He has identified, the causes for ethnic conflicts, and they seem to be, uh, the systematic explanations. He has given certain systematic explanations which identifies close proximity, weak regional, national, international authorities, and lack of security. Then you have certain domestic explanations where they say that there is a lack of effectiveness of the state in addressing the demands of these communities, where since they are minorities, the state has not taken them very seriously. Then you have the perpetual explanation that focus on false history that communities have about themselves and others. Sometimes it mostly happens that these communities, they create a mythical kind of a history, and maybe there is also a sense of deprivation arising out of that. Then, looking at the idea of tribal conflict in India, if you can just look at the major causes and effects, you would see that, according to this scholar called Sahani, conflicts can be categorized into three types: tribal conflicts with other tribal communities, tribes with the non tribes, and tribes with the state. So, most of these conflicts that we have come across, they could be, they could be arranged in any of these three categories. And the major issues, it would be land issues, because as I have told you earlier, that tribes have a different kind of a setup. They come from a different setup, they have a different social system. So they don't believe in private ownership the way we believe that, okay, this is my land, this is my piece of land. They have this communal ownership over property. And when the communal ownership is snatched away from them by the state, say in terms of the forest department taking away their access to forest resources, that causes a major crisis for them. Then, apart from that, you have the outsiders, mostly these non tribals who are settling in these tribal areas. The major reasons is, why do they need to go into the tribal areas, into the jungles? Because as I told you earlier, the tribes, they are sitting on the rich natural resources. So you need to go there for mining purposes, for other developmental activities. So, and you give them this lucrative idea that you will have good job opportunities. And that could be, you will find tribals, non-tribals into this pressure, because there is more space, the pressure on land is more. So there is also this perception that tribals are very gullible. You can, motivate them very easily, they can be exploited. So, in states like Jharkhand, Tripura, the tribes have become a minority because of the influx of migrants, and they have this feeling of being exploited. As I told you yesterday, the idea of dikus means the outsider in local dialect. It is the major, they believe that it is the major cause of their impoverishment and their miserable condition. So you will see there is this work by Myron Wenner. Uh, the name of the work is Sons of the Soil: Migration and Ethnic Conflict in India. So basically, this book deals with the tribal perception on themselves and the outsiders, and how they feel exploited because of that. Then you have the issue of forced migration of the tribes for labor, where they have to move out of their native place, and though Britishers have long gone back, but you will see that the somehow the tribal communities still live in that perception, of these British intermediaries exploiting them. So these ideas still exist. And in the present conditions, when we talk about the development projects like the special economic zones, or you will talk about the idea of land acquisition because of this special economic zone, that has been, one of the major reasons for the clash between the tribes and the non-tribes. Then apart from that, there are issues like say the creation of new nation states, say the creation of India, Pakistan and Bangladesh. And there has been certain tribes who actually got severed between the boundaries of these two countries. For example, when we talk about the Nagas, part of the Nagas you will find it in Burma and other part in India. So Nagas, they would see that okay, as an ethnic community, we need our separate identity and our separate existence. So maybe we can talk about a Naga state. So there has been any multiple number of tribes being identified because of the creation of these new nation states. Then talk about the state reorganization. When the state was being reorganized, say the government of India recognized Assam, created Nagaland in 1963, Meghalaya in 1972, Mizoram, Manipur, or see the case of Odisha, or Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh, or Jharkhand and Bihar. So it so happens that the tribes that have been coexisting, now they stand divided between two different regimes, and they have different policies. And that's the reason you will see that in most of these states, the official language and medium of instruction is mostly a non-tribal language. And when you have tribes from different regions coming and studying there, and they have to pick up a foreign language, that leads to an alienating experience on the part of the tribes. Just give me a moment, I'll be back. Just give me 1 second. Okay, so what I was trying to say that you have this new crisis coming up, then you have certain kind of inefficiency and insensitivity on the part of the administration. You have so many separatist movement going on in the northeast region. The demands are justified because they believe that the kind of treatment that they expected from the national government, it is not being given them. They are still marginalized. They have certain demands and nobody gives a heed to it. And they not only claim that these tribal areas are legal, but they believe that they are a separate ethnic group and they feel alienated, and that's the reason they have taken up to militancy. Then lack of economic development. Most of the tribal regions, you will find that they are underdeveloped. And even if that region is developing, the condition of the tribes in that region becomes still, they are still in a condition of poverty because of exploitation and oppression on the part of the non-tribals. So if you take a statistics according to the Human Development Index, you will see that the tribes, they stand in the lowest HDI ranks. Then you have lot of militants groups. At one point of time, the idea of tribes got equated with naxalism and other kind of militant groups. So basically it is a kind of a trouble that you see in the present contemporary times, where we believe that since uh, their condition remains unaddressed, and this is the recourse they have taken to, by believing that it is the entire scenario is being created by outsiders. And today you see plurality of militant groups who are everywhere, not only in all parts of the country. Then tribal rights and forests, we already had a discussion on it, because we have seen that how the forest department designated some national parks, some protected areas, to which there was a major controversy that you seem to have protected areas for animals and not for human beings, because the basic survival of these tribes, their livelihood and their life, comes from these forest areas. Then the role of certain external agencies and cover support. For example, as I told you, regarding this militancy training, there are neighboring countries and secret services which is being given by, allegedly, by China or Pakistan. And somehow, the tribes are affected because of that. Then again, is you have the role of the parties, the ruling parties, both in the center and the state, how far they have been able to address the issues of the tribes, and how their policies and decisions are inclusive. Whenever you talk about the budget or you talk about any central policy, how you tend to include the tribes in your entire development agenda. So that's the reason you will see that today tribes, they have taken to, they are somehow, they believe that there is a kind of an hegemonic influence of the mainstream, and they feel marginalized. And mostly, they, since they come from the margins, and there is it's very difficult on their part to express themselves in the at the national level, because the kind of language policy we have, the kind of medium of instruction that runs in the schools, it's very difficult for them to equip themselves, not only with the curriculum, but also learning a new language, adapting to it, and then reading something in that foreign language and competing with these outsiders who are non-tribals. So that makes the scenario very, very difficult. So you will find that there is a kind of a cultural hegemony which they believe there is it's an imposition on the part of the mainstream people on the tribes. Then another issue is the issue of conversion. The way uh, they believe that in order to escape the kind of misery they are facing, conversion can be an answer to it, and there are various things related to it. And then you have these separatist and secessionist movement that you see around in and around northeast regions. So there are so many tribal conflicts, the Bodo non-Bodo conflict in Assam. Then you have the anti-outsider movement in northeast, especially in Meghalaya and Assam. Naga Kuki class, the Kuki Paite class, the Tripura Bengali class. The list is endless, and it's tribes versus tribes, tribes versus non-tribes. And that is how these new ethnic conflicts have gained a new kind of a platform in these modern times. Now, coming to one of the recent what we say issues of the present scenario is the idea of identity. When we talk about this tribal identity, what do we mean by that? you know there is so much of debate on the loss of identity, on identity crisis, on tribes who are able to make a transition from a cultural to a assertive political kind of an identity. So basically, what do we mean by this identity? So identity has certain characteristics. You will see that when we talk about identity, we are talking at two different levels. There is an individual identity. This individual identity is it's the sum total of the my experiences as an individual in my entire life course. So it is something that I have picked up while growing up, and it is through the socialization process where my environment has an impact on me. So you have many psychoanalysts like Erickson's, you have a sociologist like G.H. Mid, C.H. Cooley, who have talked about, how a socialization has different stages in constructing that individual identity for oneself. How, we have the idea of self emerges, and what do we have in that self. And coming to the idea of community identity is different from the individual's identity, and there, it's to some extent it is identity that comes from your ethnic group. So it could be the basis of your collective memory, the kind of myths you have of about your origin, the stories about your community, your collective memory that constructs your self identity of being one. So in pre modern times, the way history was recorded, there was no written documents, but you see history in terms of myths, in terms of folklores, folk songs, in terms of our root rituals and everyday practices. So the way that collective memory is transmitted to us from one generation to another through the word of mouth, through our practices and our rituals. When I talk about my culture, uh, maybe there isn't any written history, because that you will not find. That is very rare in tribal cultures, writing your own histories. But they do have a sense of history. There is a historical consciousness that shapes their imagination, their collective memory. So that is the basis of their community identity. So when we talk about identity, there are certain features, that is the features of identity that could be stable, and the identity might vary over a period of time. Now when I say that, few years ago, the way we used to perceive tribes, okay, they are innocent people, they are, they have beautiful songs around them, they dance like this, they have this kind of art form, they invest in this kind of artistic things like, weaving or basket making. We have constructed it around certain cultural forms. But today, when you look at the tribal move scenario in the entire country, and there I don't look at them as innocent people who can be befooled. It's not the case of just being a simple cultural group who practices its own culture. No. Today, I see that this country and across the globe, this indigenous community, they are marked with so many forms of social movements. And these movements are an assertion of their identity, their political identity. So that is a transition that we see today. And as I told you, identities are products of imposition as well as they are also self created. Means identities are, it could be given, it could be ascribed, the way the community, uh, goes through, transmits its culture, its collective memory from one generation to another. But at the same time, you will see that when the scenario is oppressive around, how I create a new kind of an identity. Now you see that, okay, the Bodos, okay, they are the ones who could be militant, who could be this. Or you talk about the Niyamgiri community, okay, they worship the god. That is a new kind of an identity, that they worship the environment. So more or less they are ecologist rather than just naive, you know uh, tribes. They could, fight a case with the help of Amnesty International against the state of Odisha, and they could win the case. So you have a new kind of a self-created identity because of this oppressive and changing conditions of modern times. Then the kind of traits that you pick up, that it could be a voluntary change. For example, individuals in a particular tribe they might take up a new religion. Mostly you will see that northeastern tribes, they have taken to Christianity, but once upon a time they used to be a part of their tribal religion. So it is a voluntary kind of a identity. Then you can also have involuntary kind of identities, uh, like when slavery was practiced, it was common for conquered people to make captives and sell them in the slave market. Similarly, during ethnic cleansings, people were driven out of their homes and made refugees. So basically, it's involuntary. One moment I was happy living in my life, living in my own homestead, and fine morning I see myself being a slave or being a refugee with no fault of my own. It is the changing political and the social scenario that has caused this kind of a thing. So so this is a kind of an involuntary situation that, without my own opinion, without my choice, this is a choice I did not make, this choice was imposed on me. Then you have multiple identities at the same time, because of, say, I would say, because of your political affiliation, your religious belief, your gender, your ethnic background. So what identity you choose and what identity you try to feel that it is one of the most, the priority that you are trying to give to that particular identity. Am I talking about my national identity, that I belong to India? Am I talking about my religious identity? Am I talking about my ethnic identity? Am I talking about my language identity, my gender identity? What identity am I choosing? And a new forms of identities are being formed in this age of globalization. When you say that, okay, we are living in a cosmopolitan state, and being a tribe, and who is actually being a mouthpiece to one's community, and that person is traveling across the globe. So seeing a tribe in one's ethnic clothes, and in one's ethnic, what you say, accessories, and boarding an aircraft, an international aircraft, it creates a new kind of identity. So you are making, at the international level, your tribal identity mark being prominent. And normally we take up so many identity markers, their dress, their ethnic dress. When we say that particular tribes weaves a particular kind of cloth, and every time I go somewhere, I make sure that I put on those ethnic thing. If I'm going to a conference, I will use my vernacular language. So there are different ways of, showing my marks that I belong to a particular identity depending on the choice I make. But again, at the same time, when we say talk about social identities could be lost. We could be in a position of feeling insecure about one's social identity. And as I told you that there are so many external forces. On the one hand, you need to assimilate yourself with the mainstream population. You have the forces of globalization, the extra forces of late modernity and neoliberalism coming up. And you are no more just a homogeneous community. You, even though you want to stay homogeneous, it is very difficult for you to maintain that kind of a level. So now, looking at the tribal identity in the modern world, as I told you earlier, you have so many responses, being an individual as a tribe, or being a member of that community. Or if I say that, the way colonialism has affected me, with so many years of colonial rule, how do I look up my entire identity through that community? Now I have a new legal system, what do you say, a new kind of a legal system that has come up, which is, fortifying me legally through certain privileges. Now I can have a right over this, I can have certain kind of, you know uh, privileges that I was not able to, because I have been asserting something. The legal system has brought it. But again, the legal system can have certain negative kind of an implication on my community lifestyle also. For example, I'll give you an example. Have you heard of this, the criminal tribes? Normally, there are so many tribes, those who used to live on certain kind of, you'll find them who are into some kind of professions, the notch girls or some other kind of professions, which was seen as a taboo by the Britishers. And they, one fine morning, they declared that these particular, they created a list, and they declared that the list contains all criminal tribes. So you are like branded as a thief. This particular, it really doesn't matter you have really done anything or not, but because you belong to that community, you have been branded in a particular way. So that is something what colonialism had done to them, and the new legal system could do to them. So it can, alter your entire identity, and it can change your entire status, and you have been living in the fear that you could be arrested for no reason, because you are just a member of the criminal tribe. So you are more susceptible to doing some kind of crime, and the entire focus would be on you, because you have certain criminal genes in you, and it is a gift to you by your community. So you know all of a sudden, the pride I had in belonging to a particular community, I will start disidentifying myself from that community. So that is one of the reasons, and one of the major, what you say, changes that colonial system could do to the tribes, the new legal system, the new kind of administrative setup could do to a particular tribe. And another important factor is environment. Today, when we see that, there was a debate when the Forest Right Act came up. There was a debate that, when we talk about protection of forest, protection of other environment, and allowing the tribes, wouldn't it be an intervention on the part of the human beings, uh, who would be degrading our environment? But if you look at the tribes as a community, majority of the tribes, they have a kind of a symbiotic relation with the environment. They do not just take the forest or these natural resources as a resource. It's not just a resource for them. They believe that there is some kind of spirit. When I was referring to the Niyamgiri tribes, uh, they were asked to leave the jungle, and because there is this Niyam Raja, a hill, and which was extremely rich in bauxite, and these dongria, in this, and here the dongria skandha, they were asked to vacate that hill. But they believed that their forefathers, their god resided, it was the seat of their god. And they said that it is not possible. It is not a matter of giving me the amount of compensation, or giving me what you are trying to lure me with something or the other. But the thing is that it is the god for me. And mostly these tribes, they have their sacred groves, their totems, their, all you can say, their spiritual lords. They lie within these jungles. So the supernatural world of spirits is an extension of, you can say, their social world. So taking them away from the environment means taking them away from the basic, cultural, it's not just culture, taking them away from the major components of their lives. And when I talk about the environment, it is not just a matter of ethos that okay, we need to protect the environment for the betterment of our planet. No, it is something where they have picked up these ethos in their everyday life. So when they are trying to water a plant, it is not just meant that okay, that plant will bear me fruit, because that plant is a totem for me, it has a totemic value. The plant is my ancestor. My origin comes from that plant. They have such a kind of a symbiotic relation with the environment. So talking about the modern knowledge system, where you categorize tribal beliefs as superstitious, and we believe that could be replaced with some kind of a scientific knowledge, that's altogether a different issue, because now we are trying to tap indigenous knowledge, the knowledge that the tribes have over the forest, over the jungles, and on the different herbs, the different kind of medicinal values that each of these uh, herbs or plants have, and nobody is aware of it. Nobody knows the jungle better than the tribes. So that's the reason why we believe that now we need to document that, instead of trying to drive them away from the forest and trying to say that we are doing good to the environment. We have to you know we have to understand their position, and the meanings are shared among the members. If you look at the tribal members, they have a kind of a shared understanding regarding that community, regarding those that connection they have with that community, that the jungle has with that community. Apart from that, when we talk about tribal identity today, you know Christianity has a lot of influence, mostly not only in India or in the northeastern in regions, but the at a global level. You talk about this indigenous tribes and Christian principles. They have always, they have adopted that. In case of Central Indian tribes, the influence of Hinduism has been immense, and to some extent Ghure also said that they are backward Hindus, because you know right from the beginning we are aware of this fact that tribes, they have their own religion, but Ghure called them the backward Hindus because he believed that somewhere they have not been integrated properly, and that's the reason. So somewhere there is this relation between these two religions, Christianity and Hinduism in India, which had a major impact on the tribal identity. Now, talking about industrialization, when you talk about industrialization and urbanization, they have been the major, factors that has brought structural changes across the globe. So, look at the tribes in Chota Nagpur area. They have experienced industrialization, where industries have been set up in their areas because it's mineral rich, and due to lack of educations, these tribes could afford to get very menial kind of jobs, or maybe they would be very lowly paid. So the thing is that what I'm trying to say, that the kind of identity we associate with the tribes because of industrialization, firstly we try to displace them from their own home. We take away the source of their livelihood, their life, and we make tall claims. But the thing is that the skills that they have, the skills of surviving in the jungle, the skills of being a part of a forest dweller, the skill that nobody else has, we don't tap these skills, and instead we place them in a new kind of a setting, where their entire identity is reduced to a to an industrial laborer. So that is one of the major issues of tribes that we see today. Okay, just give me a moment. Somebody is at the door. Okay, okay, okay. Somebody else can take it. Okay, so talking about state and nation building, as I told you that we started making, protecting them. When we talked about the constitution, the constitution declared some of the scheduled areas in terms of your six, schedule 5 and schedule 6, where we have demarcated certain excluded areas, which meant that meant less of British administration and more of self governance on the part of tribes. So the reason is that they wanted to accept that, okay, this is something that is needed to flourish their identity as a tribe. And if you talk about tribal identity in the in the post independence scenario, as I told you, new identities are being created. because uh, because they have come out of a situation which was so very different from the previous generation. Now you see political mobilization by this community. They are very assertive about their own identity. It is not that okay, tribal identity means a tribe who is able to hunt, or a tribe who is able to draw good pictures or paint or weave some beautiful clothes. No, the political assertion of belonging to a community, of being an ethnic group, and the pride they have, they're trying to showcase that. And as I told you, globalization has done some harm, because globalization penetrates quite deep into these remote areas. It is because of globalization that they are being displaced, because these corporate entries have taken place. But at that same time, globalization has given them a international platform where their voices could be heard. Else, just think of these Niyamgiri tribes, these Dongriya Kandhas. It became almost an international global kind of a movement, and an international body like Amnesty India could stand in support for them. It is because of that. So it is, we can say that it is a two-edged sword. Then if you talk about their reaction to this loss of identity and change, there are many causes for this unrest. You will see tribal unrest right from the very beginning, and because they could see a threat to their privacy habitats, a threat to somebody else trying to control the resources that they depended on, uh, disruption in their traditional roles, search for new meaning. They have a different kind of a relationship with nature, which was, as I told you earlier, yesterday's class. Because the way we understand a community, we have to see the thing from their point of view, not as an outsider. With my middle class background and my education, I'm trying to observe the tribes and write something, a report on them. That is not done actually. When you are trying to study the tribes, you have to be in their shoes. You have to see the world from their point of view. So if you look at the jungle, what does the jungle mean to them? It really doesn't make sense what it means to me. So now new frontiers of identities have come up, and we are talking about a different kind of a power. Some kind of deviant behavior has also been noticed because of the modern recent changes. You will see alcoholism, you will see disappearance and disintegration of certain tribal communities. But at the same time, there is a effort on the part of the community, on the part of the state, to revive their languages, their culture. And at the same time, you will find many fission and fusion in different cultural forms coming up because of trying to reinstate their tribal identity. Then another important thing that you would see is that structural conflict that you will find in the case of tribal development. Because as I told you earlier, what does it mean by development? you know Development means different thing to different people. For person like me, I would see that okay, if a state is developed enough or not. I will see that okay, if I have good roads, I have good electricity, I have enough water. The economist would say that how the GDP is doing, what is the per capita income of a person in a particular nation. So from different dimensions, it has different meaning, and it is a multidimensional concept. But if you look at the entire thing from their scenario, development means a different thing to them. For example, today of late, you we realized when we started talking about development right from the beginning. If you look at the way India has experienced the planned development in terms of the 5 year plans, now that we have said goodbye to the 5 year plans, you would say that we started off with the growth model of development. Because development meant, what is development for us? Now it meant कि we would have growth in terms of how my country is doing, what is my GDP, what is my per capita income. So in terms of numeric values, I used to see in terms of growth. Then of late I realized that that is not something that is going to define my country. For example, when I talk about human development index, a country like Saudi Arabia, or take for example any of these Middle East countries, they really, because these are the oil rich nations and they're extremely rich, but if you look at the human development index, they stand quite low. And what could be the reason? Literacy rate. If we started looking at things from different perspectives, from a gendered perspective, we saw that okay, the literacy rate of men is really high, but women is really low. And in a country like Saudi Arabia today also, very recently, the women got the right to drive, and that too she cannot drive alone, she has to be accompanied by a male person. In order to go for a job, she has to have a written permission from her husband or her father. So maybe this is not the notion of development. Then we started talking about sustainable development. Sustainable development in terms of how, for how long that the idea of development would be sustainable. We for a very long period of time we believe that environment is something, ecology is something which is just a resource on which capitalism could build its empire. But today we realize that no, this is meant for our survival. So growth along with protection of the environment. How do I address the gender issues? How do I address the issues of the children? How I address education? How I talk about poverty? And again, today I do not see poverty. By poverty I do not mean just economic poverty. We talk about multidimensional poverty. We talk about different nuances. And even you see, the COVID has been an eye opener, where we could see that how man-made things or human-made things could be so very disastrous. So overall, we are talking about a development which is multidimensional, where which is inclusive. I do not mean that by development how my country is doing in terms of GDP or in terms of growth, but how each section of the society is doing well. So maybe I would be talking about freedom, political freedom, freedom of expression, how fully I can express myself, the opportunities I have. The more number of opportunities I have, the more developed I am. If I say I do not have this opportunity, people would be blaming me, okay, you are not doing well enough, maybe your colleagues have gone high. But the thing is that the number of what the state has given me, when can I say that a state is a developed state? When I can have enough choices and I can choose anything from them. So there are certain structural constraints to development. You can talk about psychological constraints, the need to achieve something. We can talk about certain social constraint that comes because of my ethnicity, as I was telling you, the way I portray social capital, cultural capital. I was just referring to this idea of multidimensional poverty. So as I told you, by poverty, it is not economic poverty. When we say that, what does a poor person lack? Now money, okay, give them money, but still that person remains poor. Now that person doesn't have social capital, because tomorrow if a poor person speaks or asks for some help, nobody would listen, because that person doesn't have that kind of a social capital. He doesn't come from the background that you have. So today the new microfinance revolution that has unleashed after the 2000, you talk about Grameen Bank and you talk about Muhammad Yunus. It is not only providing economic capital where poverty can be eliminated, but social capital, the kind of groups they make, the kind of solidarity that, okay, let's stand for each other. As poor person, we stand for each other. We are trying to create new kinds of social and cultural capital, the way we are focusing on skill today. So that is the reason, and as such, these tribes, they had so many social constraints in terms of literacy, in terms of education, in terms of this capital, in terms of being poor. So overcoming them, political concerns, political conflicts that they have seen, the kind of governance they have witnessed, how it could harm them economically, socially, you know taking them away their basic rights. And even if now that we are talking about a sensitive state which has a list of privileges and protection for them, how in that context they're able to make their voice heard. Then coming to economic constraint, where we can talk about promoting entrepreneurship among them, where we can take their traditional skills to a new height. We can have different tribes were unable to benefit from land reforms. That is what the Debar commission observed. And the schemes of land reform was based upon landlord's tenant system, and tribes customarily they never were a part of this system. They had this communal way of cultivating the communal property. So you see that the Haber Commission had gone into the circumstances leading to tribal land alienation. It was the observation of the report, and they believe that it is because of land alienation, because of the ignorance of the tribal people, and somehow some loopholes in the law was there, and not enough state mechanism was there to empower the powerless tribes, and they voluntarily surrendered. That was when they were asked to do something by the landlords. So today we even talk about large multi-purpose societies and tribal cooperatives, where which was created by central government to enable tribal communities so that they can access credit, because credit has been one of the major barriers for these uh, societies. And today, as I told you, the microfinance revolution has come up in a very big way, because it gives you microcredit, but at the same time it gives you, or it tries to create a facilitating environment where a tribal person who has never seen a bank, even though I have this desire, I have this skill to do something, I'll always have this fear to enter the bank. No, let the bank come to you. Let's, as a community, let's all come together so that we can help each other in need. You are in need today, and the rest of the community members will come up. So this is the basic idea of providing social as well as cultural capital to these persons. So when we talk about today, the very idea of you know mainstreaming development, you know some of the major issues of today's times is displacement. Because rehabilitation, when we say that, okay, they have been given this piece of land, in lieu of that, what's the problem? They are secured with a government job, they have been given a house, but the thing is that they are not skilled enough to be in the new setup. And they, as I told you, that their lives are so very tuned with nature, they cannot be separated from nature. So maybe we are not seeing things from the tribal point of view. And regarding forest rights, we already had a discussion. And today, as I told you earlier, that there is an institutionalization of intellectual property rights under the World Trade Organization. And today we think of, we have thought of preserving and conserving the knowledge of the indigenous people. So for a very long period of time, we believe that they're stupid people, they're superstitious. What knowledge can a tribe give to you? But the kind of indigenous knowledge that they carry with themselves, no other person can. When it comes to the traditional healing practices, the medicinal herbs that only they are aware of, what part of the tree should be consumed, what is poisonous, or what rare variety is available in a particular jungle, they can think. So today we have started thinking about a new intellectual property system, where we can tap this knowledge, and a knowledge that can be patented and used for commercial gains. So now the time has come where we cannot restrict the tribes to their own isolated setups. They have to, and since we are penetrating, they also have to come out of that domain. So now we talk about intellectual property rights for the tribes, and NGOs have taken, they are like a new social movement today. They have playing a new role in development of these tribal communities, for bringing change, for provision of service. Suppose there is a disaster, what could be done, how to implement certain programs, because they are not aware, since they are not literate, they're not aware of the new programs by the government. So at the implementation level, they do come with some kind of help. So this was about the recent changes that we could see in the tribal scenario. Next class we will maybe move on to the last unit. Yes, Mr. Hussein.
Yeah, good evening, ma'am.
Yeah.
Ma'am, I was going to ask about the laws and the police reforms that are going on, like in the new Nyaya Sanhita and the IPC, old IPC. There we have a special provision for the scheduled caste and special police stations for them.
Mm-hmm.
So, ma'am, as per my knowledge and context, ma'am, though we are a very diverse society, and especially the indigenous
Huh?
people belong to the forest, but most of them have actually shifted, most of them have migrated to the cities, like
Hmm.
Indore, Bhopal, Ujjain in Madhya Pradesh. Similarly, in the nearby areas, young people have actually migrated to the nearby areas of the cities and have settled there mostly. They are not doing the industrial craft that are taking place. Like in Madhya Pradesh, there are handicraft and paintings that are done. They are only doing for I mean that they are only pursuing this type of things are pursued by the old age people. And now they are getting Padma Bhushan and Padma Vibhushan on that thing from the tribal background. Like the Bhujibhai recently got the uh, award in by the president, Draupadi Murmu. But the main point is that the laws that are being made, and I feel that are being misused.
Yeah, that's true. And that's the reason, since most of them are illiterate, they're not even aware of what new laws have come for them. And that's the reason why we say, no, we need a lot of intervention from the part of the NGOs, from the
Yeah,
part of
right.
the state. That is
So, ma'am,
one thing.
I belong to a community and area, and my
Hmm.
institution that I actually pursued earlier from my studies and job work. I belong to maybe it can be tell a traditional plus modern both I have pursued. But
Mm-hmm.
actually, what I realized is that there is a fixed mindset in the tribal areas, ma'am, that toward the development.
Mm-hmm.
Though they are food secure, the food security is a major issue. They are very food secure, unlike the agricultural activity that are carried on in Madhya Pradesh. Mostly farmers are committing suicide, market people are committing suicide when they are in debt. But there are no such cases, as per my knowledge, that any tribal person is doing suicide because of food issues or scarcity of food. So I feel that there is lot of scope in developing of a food market, like we have discussed earlier, that there are markets in Northeast India, and similarly organic market is being developed. Fully organic stuff is being taking place. So, ma'am, what all things can be discussed about this market opportunity and business opportunities and related to pharmacy business, as I am also a pharmacy enthusiast in pharmacovigilance.
Yeah,
So how can
no, that's a very important issue that you have raised, but it again, it has two sides. If you say that now we have started realizing that they have immense knowledge base with them, the kind of indigenous knowledge that they carry with them, and at the same time you have this corporate entry into these
yeah, right,
regions.
right.
Not only these pharmaceutical industries who would be tapping this kind of knowledge system and the products also. And don't you think that there is so much of craze for these indigenous food these days, when we talk about millet mission, when we talk about going back to the basic consumer goods, the basic goods that the tribes used to use. They're sustainable, they're eco-friendly, they're in every way, and at the same time they have become so very expensive also, and we are really not sure how much the tribe is getting out of it. But there is a massive, we can say, presence of the corporate. For example, the millets that we have, the little millets, the foxtail millet, they are so very expensive in the market, and it used to be the basic diet of a tribe. And now, in most of the states, the government has given these 1 rupee rice, or these, they have started donating these ration thing for free. So the thing is that, isn't it a kind of a food hijacking for them? you know Now for few generations they are being socialized with rice. They used to have millet as their staple food, and now you have started making millet a brand superfood that is commercially, so very expensive, and also in the international market it is considered to be a superfood. So at some point of time we have started valuing them, but we are also hijacking them from the tribes. So can we say that, the millets at one point of time would be so precious and expensive that the tribes would not be in a position to afford it, when it has been for ages their own staple food? One thing is that.
Yeah,
And
I got
talking
the point. Man. I got the point. That's why they only need the license for doing their using their own resources.
yes. So that's a tricky situation. As I told you, globalization comes as a double edged sword. It has its own advantages and disadvantages also. So we have so many unforeseen crises coming up that we slowly realize that, okay, we thought that this would happen, but it is leading to this. And regarding when you are saying that, okay, farmer suicide, there has been cases, in I have heard of cases, read about them in uh, remote areas in Odisha, the tribal Odissas, where there has been cases of starvation and all. And during one part of the time, when in the 50s and 60s, we have this district called Kolahandi. Kolahandi literally means the black pot, means it was given this kind of a name because of its starvation death among the tribes. But now maybe the situation has changed. The situation has immensely changed. So new challenges are coming up, but at the same time we cannot say that we are completely, free from the crisis that the tribes faced all through. Thank you for your observation, Hussein.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you, ma'am, for the clarification. Really helpful.
Okay, so we will meet tomorrow, same time. Thank you.